to really tell the story properly, the fall of the angels, which is you're in another place. I have ideas about how to do that, and ideas about how to evoke things and emotions in people from the way you depict it and the way you shoot it.
Hollywood has had its share of cursed productions, sets that went wrong, stars who walked away changed forever. But nothing has ever come close to what allegedly happened in the ancient caves of southern Italy in 2003. We're talking lightning striking the same man twice on a cloudless day. Crew members hearing voices that weren't there. Faces appearing in raw footage that nobody filmed. And for over 20 years, Mel Gibson said nothing. So when he finally opened up about what really went down on the set of The Passion of the Christ, the most controversial, the most profitable, and arguably the most haunted film ever made, the world stopped and listened. Because what he said, nobody could explain it. And honestly, neither can we. The man, the mission, the madness. Let's set the scene, because you cannot understand what happened on that set without first understanding who Mel Gibson was when he decided to make this film, and how absolutely unhinged the decision looked to everyone around him. By the early 2000s, Mel Gibson was Hollywood royalty. Full stop. He had 2 Academy Awards for Braveheart, Best Picture and Best Director.
Mel Gibson for Braveheart.
He was one of the most bankable action stars on the planet, thanks to the Lethal Weapon franchise. Studios were lining up to hand this man blank checks. He could have made anything. A big-budget sequel, a prestige war drama, a crowd-pleasing thriller. Instead, he told Hollywood he wanted to make a film about the last 12 hours of Jesus Christ's life, in Aramaic and Latin, with no subtitles in the original cut. Oh, and he planned to pay for the whole thing himself. The reaction from the studio system was exactly what you'd expect. Confusion, laughter, concern. Multiple studio executives reportedly passed on the project. One insider famously quipped that Gibson had essentially announced he was going to make the world's most expensive home movie in a dead language about the most divisive figure in human history. Everyone thought he'd lost his mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. What was it that made one of the most powerful men in Hollywood risk everything? His money, his reputation, his career, on a film that no studio would touch? And was there something deeper going on? Something that even Gibson himself couldn't fully explain. The $45 million bet and the obsession behind it. Gibson didn't just produce The Passion of the Christ, he became it. He mortgaged his own home, pouring $45 million of his own money, yes, his personal money, into this production. No safety net, no studio backing, no guarantee that a single ticket would ever be sold. He has spoken in verified interviews, including a 2004 interview with ABC News' Diane Sawyer about being in a deeply dark place personally before embarking on the project. He described feelings of hopelessness and spoke about the film essentially becoming his spiritual lifeline.
It's about faith, hope, love, and forgiveness. It's a reality for me. I believe that. I have to.
This wasn't a calculated career move. By all accounts, this was a man on the edge who threw everything he had at something he believed in with a ferocity that made the people around him genuinely nervous. Production was set up in Matera, Italy, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Think cave dwellings carved into ancient rock, narrow winding streets, an atmosphere so thick with history it practically breathes on you. UNESCO calls it a World Heritage Site. Film crews called it otherworldly. And that word, otherworldly, would come up again and again before the production was over. Gibson assembled an international cast, hiring Italian, Romanian, and American actors. For the central role of Jesus Christ, he cast a relatively unknown American actor named Jim Caviezel. And that casting decision, it would end up being the center of every single strange story to come out of this production. Because once those cameras started rolling in the ancient hills of southern Italy, things started happening that nobody on that set had a rational explanation for. And the first target? The man playing Jesus himself. The man who played Jesus and paid for it. Jim Caviezel. Remember that name because his story is the beating heart of everything strange and inexplicable about this production. Before The Passion of the Christ, Caviezel was a working actor. Solid credits, decent career, but nowhere near a household name. Gibson chose him partly, reportedly, because his initials, JC, matched the character he'd be playing. Whether you find that poetic or eerie probably depends on your disposition. Either way, what happened to Caviezel during filming reads less like a behind-the-scenes documentary and more like something you'd watch at 2 a.m. on a paranormal cable channel. Let's start with what is confirmed, because yes, some of this is actually on the record. During the filming of the Sermon on the Mount scene, lightning struck Jim Caviezel on what witnesses described as a clear day. He has personally confirmed this in a verified interview on the 700 Club, a Christian television program, where he recounted the experience in his own words. He described seeing a flash, feeling the impact, and said his hair stood up and light came out of his fingers. The assistant director, John Michelini, was also reportedly struck during the same incident, and according to multiple accounts from crew members present, the sky showed no signs of an incoming storm. That alone would be enough to make any reasonable person pause, but it didn't stop there. Caviezel suffered a litany of physical injuries during production that went far beyond the typical rigors of a demanding film shoot. He dislocated his shoulder during the scenes depicting the carrying of the cross.
And my shoulder had just been, the AC joint had been ripped so badly.
He contracted hypothermia and pneumonia during outdoor filming in the cold Italian hills. The makeup and prosthetics required to depict the crucifixion took 8 to 9 hours to apply each day, leaving him in physical agony for much of the shoot. Crew members who worked closely with Caviezel have described, in various retrospective interviews and documentary features, a man who seemed genuinely changed over the course of production, not just exhausted, transformed, quieter, more intense. Crew members used words like heavy and distant to describe his presence on set. One crew member reportedly said being around Caviezel during those months felt like being around someone carrying an invisible weight. And Caviezel himself? He has said openly in multiple verified interviews that he believes he suffered for this role in ways that went beyond the physical. He has spoken about his faith being profoundly deepened by the experience, and about his career taking a significant hit in Hollywood afterward, which he has attributed publicly to the controversial nature of the film. So what was Gibson making of all of this while it was happening? Because if you thought the lightning strike was where the strange occurrences ended, you are not even close to ready for what the crew reported happening when the cameras stopped rolling. The set nobody talks about, voices, shadows, and faces in the footage. Here's where we have to be honest with you, because that's just how we roll over here. Some of what circulates online about the set of The Passion of the Christ is verified. Some of it is reported by people who were there but has never been independently confirmed. And some of it sits in that murky, fascinating gray zone where you can't prove it happened, but you also can't entirely dismiss it. We're going to give you all of it, labeled accordingly, because you deserve to decide for yourself. What is reported by multiple crew members across various retrospective interviews and faith-based documentary features is that strange atmospheric phenomena occurred repeatedly during production. Sudden, unexplained wind gusts that damaged equipment during key emotional scenes. Dramatic, unforecast changes in light and weather that halted filming. A persistent feeling among crew that something beyond the visible was present on set. Multiple crew members have reportedly described hearing sounds, voices, murmurs, in areas of the set that were empty. These accounts have circulated in faith-based media circles for years, though they have not been verified by mainstream journalistic sources. We include them because they are part of the documented cultural story of this production, even if they remain unproven. Then there are the claims about faces in footage. Crew members have allegedly reported discovering, during playback of raw footage, images of faces that had not been present during filming. This claim is unverified and has not been confirmed by any primary source on the record. We tell you this not to sell you a ghost story, but because it is part of the legend of this production, and you deserve to know exactly where the line between fact and folklore sits. What is confirmed is this: the overall experience on set was so intense, so physically and emotionally demanding, that multiple crew members have described the production as unlike anything they had worked on before or since. Several reportedly underwent personal spiritual experiences during filming. At least one crew member, again per retrospective accounts in faith-based media, is said to have converted to Christianity during the production. And Gibson was watching all of this, absorbing all of it, leading a production that was, by any objective measure, one of the most grueling and emotionally extreme undertakings in modern film history. But what did he actually say about it? Because for 20 years, Mel Gibson was essentially silent on the specifics of what happened on that set. So when he finally began opening up, what exactly did he say? And why did it take so long? Gibson breaks his silence, what he actually said. Let's talk about what Mel Gibson has actually said, on the record, verifiably, about the making of The Passion of the Christ, because this is important. In January 2025, Gibson appeared on EWTN's The World Over, a legitimate Catholic television program, and spoke at length about his faith, the spiritual dimensions of his work, and his upcoming film, a sequel to The Passion of the Christ, tentatively titled The Resurrection of the Christ.
Even more, to begin work on his sequel to The Passion of the Christ, The Resurrection.
In that interview, Gibson was reflective, personal, and clearly still deeply connected to the spiritual journey the original film represented for him. He has, across multiple verified interviews over the years, described the making of The Passion in terms that go beyond the purely cinematic. He has talked about feeling spiritually guided during the production. He has spoken about the film as a personal act of faith rather than a commercial venture. And crucially, he has never offered a fully rational, clinical explanation for everything that happened on that set. Not because he's hiding something, but because, by his own framing, some of it simply resists rational explanation. In a 2004 interview with Diane Sawyer on ABC's Primetime, Gibson was candid about his personal struggles leading up to the film, describing a period of genuine despair, and about his belief that the film emerged from something beyond his own creative will. He stopped short of sensationalism, but he didn't dismiss the inexplicable either. And that, right there, is the heart of why this story won't die. Because the man at the center of it, one of the most commercially successful filmmakers of his generation, has never fully closed the door on the idea that something beyond the ordinary was at work. So what happened to that man after the cameras stopped rolling? Because making the most profitable independent film of all time should have been a triumph of Hollywood proportions. Instead, what happened to Mel Gibson in the years that followed reads like its own kind of fall from grace. And the question everyone has been asking is, was it connected? The aftermath, glory, scandal, and the price of controversy. When The Passion of the Christ hit theaters on February 25, 2004, it exploded. $26.5 million on day one. Over $612 million worldwide on a $45 million budget. For a minute, Mel Gibson looked untouchable, but then came the backlash. Critics called it anti-Semitic. Scholars questioned its accuracy. Protests flared. And in 2006, it all blew up. On July 28, 2006, Gibson was pulled over on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California, with a blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit. What followed was one of the most catastrophic celebrity implosions of the 2000s. During the arrest, Gibson made a series of deeply offensive anti-Semitic remarks to the arresting officers, remarks that were documented in the arrest report and subsequently leaked to the media. He also made sexist comments to a female officer. The fallout was immediate and severe. Gibson issued multiple public apologies. He entered an alcohol rehabilitation program, but Hollywood, already divided over The Passion, essentially closed its doors. Projects dried up. His production deal evaporated. For years, he was radioactive in the industry. Jim Caviezel faced his own quieter form of exile. In various interviews, he has been candid about the fact that his career stalled significantly following the film's release. A consequence, he has suggested, of the film's controversial status and its association with a now disgraced filmmaker. It looked like the end. But Hollywood loves a comeback almost as much as it loves a scandal. Because just when the industry had written both men off for good, something happened that nobody saw coming. So how exactly did Mel Gibson claw his way back? And what does his return tell us about the strange, full-circle arc of this entire story? The comeback, the sequel, and the story that won't end. Nobody in Hollywood comes back from what Mel Gibson went through in 2006. That's the conventional wisdom, or at least what the industry tells itself. And then, inconveniently, Mel Gibson came back, rewriting that. In 2016, a full decade after the Malibu arrest, Gibson directed Hacksaw Ridge, the true story of Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector who served as a medic in World War II without ever carrying a weapon. The film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. It won 2. Critics who had written Gibson off were now awkwardly writing rave reviews. It was one of the most remarkable directorial comebacks in Hollywood history, and through all of it, the scandal, the exile, the slow rehabilitation, and the triumphant return, the shadow of the Passion of the Christ never fully lifted. It remained the defining work of his career, the film that cost him everything and gave him everything simultaneously. The production that, by all accounts, changed him in ways he has never fully been able to articulate. And now, Gibson has confirmed in verified interviews, including his January 2025 EWTN appearance, that he is actively working on a sequel, The Resurrection of the Christ. He has described it as a project he has been developing for years. Jim Caviezel is reportedly set to reprise his role as Jesus. The two men, both changed and scarred by the original production, are preparing to go back, which raises a simple question that nobody in Hollywood seems entirely comfortable asking out loud. After everything that happened, the lightning, the injuries, the voices, the career fallout, the scandal, why would these two men choose to go back? What is it about this story, this project, that keeps pulling them in? And what does Gibson believe he still hasn't fully told us? What does Gibson really believe happened? Here's what makes this so intriguing. Mel Gibson has never leaned into the spooky story circuit. No dramatic tell-alls, no paranormal press tour. When he talks about the Passion of the Christ, it's measured, rooted in faith, not spectacle. But he's also never shut the door on the strange things people still whisper about. He's never offered a tidy, rational wrap-up either. That gray area, somewhere between denial and confirmation, is exactly where 2 decades of speculation have thrived. What he has said consistently is that making the film was the most spiritually significant experience of his life, born out of personal crisis and deep conviction. Jim Caviezel has been even more blunt about the physical and spiritual toll and his belief that not everything that happened was random. And now they're returning to the story that changed them both. Here's what we know for certain. Mel Gibson, against every rational piece of Hollywood advice, self-funded a $45 million film in a dead language about the most controversial figure in history. He filmed it in one of the world's oldest cities. His leading man was struck by lightning on a clear day and went on to describe his experience as transformative in ways that had nothing to do with acting. Crew members came away from the production changed, some reportedly permanently. The film made over $612 million, broke records, and started arguments that are still happening. And it marked the beginning of a period of professional and personal destruction for the man who made it, followed eventually by a return that nobody predicted and nobody can fully account for either. Mel Gibson has never given a dramatic tell-all interview about the supernatural events on that set, but he has never closed the door on them either. He has kept a 20-year silence that is somehow louder than any confession. And now, with the sequel in development, and both he and Caviezel preparing to revisit this story one more time, the question hangs in the air like the smell of rain before a storm. What happened in Matera, Italy in 2003? What did those crew members hear? What did they see in that footage? What does a man feel when lightning finds him twice on a cloudless day while he is playing the Son of God? Mel Gibson says no one can explain it, and honestly, After 20 years of trying, we're starting to believe him. So here's where I'd leave you. If lightning strikes once, that's weather. If it strikes twice while you're playing Jesus, that's a writer's room in heaven working overtime. Was it coincidence? Chaos? Something else entirely? I don't know. Hollywood doesn't know. And apparently, neither does Mel Gibson. But I want to know what you think. Was this divine drama, or just very dramatic filmmaking? Drop your theory in the comments. Keep it respectful. Keep it spicy. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into holy cinema chaos, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because if the resurrection of the Christ actually happens, oh, we're absolutely coming back to talk about it.